This is OFN NFL Preview. What's that smirk on your face for, Mark?
I love this division that we're going to do, Greg, because my hometown Cleveland Browns live in the division.
I was doing my open and I looked at you and you had the smirk on your face. What's something going on? Something up my nose or something like that? Then again, you can't see me anyway. But anyway, yeah, the AFC North. So Cleveland, why? Is that your hometown team?
Cleveland is where I was born and raised and lived for 50 years.
You say
So,
15
yes,
or 50?
the big 5-0.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So I've been through a lot with all of the Cleveland teams, the Cleveland Browns right at the forefront. It's been a long, long time between drinks of water for the Cleveland franchises to win a world championship. Obviously, LeBron James did it with the Cavaliers, but the Cleveland Browns football team is another story.
Yes. And we'll be getting into Cleveland in just a minute, but let's go back basically to let everybody know. OFN NFL Preview, our lads football network. We are in our 4th of 8 previews. So we have 4 more divisions to go. We'll enter the NFC South or AFC South next week. I'll make up my mind before the show is over. Now, when I was going over the odds for the division, Mark, and we'll start with Baltimore in just a minute, but when I was going over the odds for the division and I was thinking about what it could be, I actually thought Cleveland would have been second. I just did. And maybe I was foolish of me because with Roethlisberger coming back and their reputation and Cleveland's reputation, it probably was foolish of me. I don't know. I just have a really good feeling about Cleveland this year. I think that I've seen this happen so many times before. I'm sure you have too, when these teams are built up. Oh, this is the team, and look at what they're going to do. And then they fall flat on their face. And a lot of times it'll be that next year that they come back, and then they make a statement, especially because they've made a much better move with the coaching staff. This is just way too talented of a football team for them not to be knocking on the playoff door in December. But, yeah, I guess Pittsburgh being second pick in this division as far as the odds are concerned does make sense, even though I might have thought Cleveland could have been a possibility.
Well, I agree with you, Greg. Right now it's all about name and reputation. Pittsburgh has the name and the reputation. Cleveland has disappointed a lot of people here. Obviously, since Baker Mayfield took over the program here, a lot more was expected from the team and not delivered. But these changes they've made in the offseason have been all for the good, not only at the coaching level, but also upstairs at the general manager level. He made some great offseason free agent signings. They had a really solid draft. So when you're not expected to win, all of a sudden you're playing a lot less fancy free, if you will, foot free. When the expectations are there like they were last year, you're under a spotlight and the pressure suddenly mounts. I think it'll be a different year for the Cleveland Browns this year, and I think they could end up knocking on the playoff doors. We'll talk about them when we get to them.
Yeah, because there's a lot of media types that stuck their neck out for them last year, so they're not going to do it again this year, which is the reason why they are not going to be labeled some sort of a surprise team to keep an eye on this year. Okay, but let's start with Baltimore. 3-1 to win the championship, 6-1 to win the Super Bowl. Heavy favorites. I'm not sure there are many teams that are more of a heavy favorite than Baltimore. I guess maybe Kansas City, but what are they? Minus 240 actually. I will never put down minus 240 on any wager, anytime, anywhere. That's just me. Especially when all you have to, Lamar Jackson gets hurt at some point during the season, it goes down for the year, you're done. So I just wouldn't do that. If you're crazy enough to put money on Baltimore to win the division with odds like that, then maybe wait a little while, at least a few weeks, just make sure Lamar Jackson does stay healthy, or maybe they get off to a slow start somehow. Pittsburgh gets off to a fast start, the odds come down a little bit. But as far as realistic odds, the championship odds, the Super Bowl odds, that's a different story. I think if I'm risking myself on Baltimore, I'd rather just go with the Super Bowl at 6-1. Even 3-1 is a little too low for me. So if I'm wagering on Baltimore this year in any way, as far as futures, Super Bowl 6-1 is probably the way that I go, even though I will not be taking Baltimore to win the Super Bowl this year. But that's just me.
Well, we just talked about expectations, and they're now suddenly all on Baltimore this football season to win the division. And it's been a long time since they've been favored to win this division. So they're in the same boat this year that Cleveland was in last year,
Yep.
based a lot upon what happened last football season here with the breakout from the Lamar Jackson season. Their strength of schedule is really, really favorable. If you look at their opponents from last year, they have the softest schedule in the league, although there's a better way to determine strength of schedule than that, but it's at least a talking point. And you've also got a factor here with Baltimore this year that they're only going to travel 6,300 miles in their road games. That's by far the fewest of any NFL team over the last 4 seasons. So a lot of good factors come in Baltimore's favor here this year when you're checking boxes. They also did a real good job in the offseason with some acquisitions.
Yes.
So, everything is there for Baltimore. In fact, they are at some places a co-favorite to make it to the Super Bowl with Kansas City here. That's how well liked and respected they are in Las Vegas as we speak right now. But I am not one of those people. I think all of a sudden, it's what I call that Peter Principle theory. When you rise to the level of incompetence, you end up seeing what happens. And with this price on this team this year, I think that could happen this year.
Yeah, look, the big deal that they made was the Calais Campbell deal. So that's a huge trade. The draft was, look, you trust Baltimore historically. They've done a very good job, and even though Ozzy's not there anymore, they know what they're doing. So I like some of the young talent that they brought in as far as rookies are concerned. But look, it's all about taking that next step with Lamar Jackson and in the passing game. They must stop a couple things. First, they have to stop being a one-dimensional offensive team. Yeah, Lamar Jackson opened things up a little bit more. He does have young receivers. He had a couple of rookies last year, including Marquise Brown, so that'll help that they're a year older. I like the rookie receivers they drafted this year, so that'll help out with depth. They've got the tight ends. They've got the running game. So offensively, I think they're going to be fine. But Lamar Jackson just has to be a more consistent, especially downfield passer. We'll see if that could happen. But on defense, they've got to stop the run. Tennessee killed them in the playoff game. And that's why they went out and drafted Harrison and Patrick Queen. That's their number one priority. We've got to make sure that if we come up against one of those teams again, we're not going to get embarrassed.
Well, they allowed 4.5 yards of carry last year. That's not a real good number for any team that makes the playoffs, because once you do just that, it's obvious what the other team's coaching plan is going to be. That's to attack that rush defense. On the other side of the ball, you mentioned about balancing out Lamar Jackson here. I think the draft selection of J.K. Dobbins is going to end up being a good one for Baltimore.
Yep.
I think he's going to help balance that backfield a little bit better here. And I think he was better than a second-round selection as he was in this particular draft here. So I think he could end up being a surprise as far as the draft goes here as well. But I can't get past the expectations of a football team. And you couple that, Greg, with the fact that there's all kinds of film on Lamar Jackson right now. It's being broken down as we're speaking right now. How to best contain him if it's at all possible, but also how to force him to throw the football. So, all these factors all come together here, and I think it ends up being a disappointing season for the Blackbirds in Baltimore.
He also has to stay healthy. I mean, we know the more you run, the likelier the chance you're just going to take the wrong step, somebody's going to hit you late, whatever. Just the longer that happens, the odds just start to shrink that he's going to get hurt. The other thing, and we talked about this a lot, obviously, on a week-to-week basis with Harbaugh as a coach, and that's why it's interesting that you talked about them being the favorite now. That's the Harbaugh thing. When we study the numbers, and of course you could take a look. I'm just going to go ahead and grab the Playbook magazine right here. So you can order this Playbook magazine at playbook.com. You can also go to, Barnes & Noble's?
Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, and a lot of other independent newsstands, but Barnes & Noble, Books A Million is the main two distributors. Yes.
Yeah, so as far as Harbaugh, you could look at the numbers. I mean, he is a really good coach when you count them out, when they're the underdog. You don't want to go up against Harbaugh in especially big games when he's the underdog. But you flip the switch, things even out a little bit more.
Exactly. You price them accordingly, and while he is a good underdog at home, he's mediocre at best as a favorite. You go back and you look at them the last 3 years, just 8 and 15 to the spread, laying points at home. That's not a particularly good role, and the points they'll be laying this year will be more than they've laid in those 3 years in the past. So they've got some high hurdles to get over here this year.
Okay, now let's talk about Pittsburgh. The Steelers are 4-1 to win the division, which is not a bad number for Ben Roethlisberger and Mike Tomlin to win the division. Also 12-1 to win the AFC, 22-1 to win the Super Bowl. So, well, yeah, what do you think about that 4-1 number for Pittsburgh? It's all really going to depend on the health, obviously, of Ben Roethlisberger.
Well, it looks attractive. It does, because number one, you do have Ben Roethlisberger, and you've got a coach that knows how to win football games. And Pittsburgh's demise last year came largely because Big Ben went down. Mason Rudolph was not the answer. He never will be the answer to this football team. And having Roethlisberger back there will be a real positive for the football team. I know he's getting long in the tooth, but a few less miles because of sitting out last football season here. So I can understand exactly why Vegas thinks that they could be maybe perhaps the second best team in this division.
Eric Ebron, I'm not a big fan. Never have been a big fan of Eric Ebron, even when he had that big year for the Colts. It was product of Andrew Luck, but hey, he has Ben Roethlisberger now. So look, he's going to make his share of dumb plays and drops and things of that nature, but he'll get a lot of opportunities, and chances are he can really help out this offense, because Ben has not had that type of tight end for a few years.
Well, especially late in his later years here, he's not likely to be throwing the ball down the field. Not that he ever was that as a quarterback, but when he had a stronger arm, he was capable of doing that. I think he'll be very, very satisfied to sit in a rocking chair, be satisfied getting the ball to Ebron and running backs out of the backfield as well. So you'll see Ben adjusting to what teams give this football team. They'll probably likely give them a little more of a longer passing lanes, if you will. But here I think Ben Roethlisberger being healthy is the key to this football team.
Yeah, and as far as the receivers are concerned, Juju, I think the jury is still out on whether Juju can be a true impact number one guy. He has games and makes plays like he is, but then there'll be times when he just doesn't come through for you like you would expect a number one. But then again, look, for Ben and Juju to be together for a full season, that's going to also tell us a lot, and I think that'll help Juju Smith. But also the improvement of James Washington and Deontay Johnson, and selecting Chase Claypool. Having those receivers to surround Juju, throw in Eric Ebron. They've got some good running backs. They drafted the speedster McFarland. This is actually, I look at the skill position talent that Ben is playing with this year, and I think it might be the deepest group of talent that he's had. I mean, yeah, he had Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell, but there were two players. He has about 5 or 6 players that actually can make an impact for him offensively.
He does, and that's only going to open things up for this Pittsburgh attack here as well. The running back, the kid from Pittsburgh who was hurt, I don't know if he'll be back this year.
Well, he said he's going to play.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, good, because he's also a key cog to this particular attack here. James Conner is. So, if it all ends up coming to being, the offense could be vastly improved. It really, really went backwards last year, over 120 yards a game. But again, that was all minus Big Ben. And I think what happens to this football team, what also works, is the defense. And since they added Minkah Fitzpatrick from the Miami Dolphins in what was probably the steal of the year as far as trades are concerned, he really solidifies that secondary here. And they were maybe arguably the weakest secondary, and they've gone to maybe the best secondary with him. So he's also a big cog to the defense.
All right. So Pittsburgh, again, 12. I don't know, as far as, I don't think they're a bad gamble. Like, if I was going to take them now to begin the season, I would just say, you know what, I'll throw some money on them to win the Super Bowl at 22-1. But I would also obviously want to see how things go to begin the season, because we don't know how quickly it's going to take Ben and a lot of these new young players that he hasn't played with before to gel together. So that maybe you're patient. Maybe your odds go up a little bit more, but 22-1 is not a bad Super Bowl pick with Pittsburgh. They wouldn't be my first choice, but you always got to sprinkle in, several, maybe 3 to 5 that you're hoping you can get lucky with, and the Steelers might be one of those teams.
Well, you know they're going to be knocking on the door. That's a Mike Tomlin trait. So, at 22-1, that puts yourself into a favorable position to make that play. You're also banking on the fact that you think Baltimore might not be as good as Vegas feels they can be. That ends up maybe elevating Pittsburgh, so it helps your chances there that way. You figure that if Baltimore comes down this year, it will either be Cleveland or Pittsburgh to win this division here, and at 6-1 to win the division or 22-1 to the Super Bowl makes Pittsburgh, I think, an
And by the
attractive
way,
play.
Pittsburgh, because Ben will be back, better. Cleveland's definitely going to be better, and Cincinnati's going to be better. So this is going to be a much tougher division for every team, including the top team. It's not going to. We're not saying Baltimore's not going to win this division, but a lot of these games that they played last year were walkovers. That's not going to be the case this year.
No, it's not going to be the case because there's a thing called game film. We talked about that earlier. And the mistakes that teams made last year against Baltimore, you can look for them to check that in advance of taking them on again this year, not making the same mistakes, and also forcing Lamar Jackson to do some things that he hasn't done in the past. That's what good defensive coordinators will likely do in a case of preparing for Lamar Jackson. So, and you mentioned the Cincinnati Bengals. We're going to talk about them here shortly, but this is far from the AFC East, where it's always been New England and nobody else. In this particular division, you've got three teams that can compete for the title, and you're going to have a vastly improved Cincinnati Bengal football team as well. So this is one of the divisions I think that's kind of wide open, if you will, if you believe in the fact that Baltimore is going to come back to the pack.
Cleveland's one of those other teams, 5-1 to win the division, 16-1 to win the championship, and 30-1 to win the Super Bowl. Look, I'm not going to go overboard and say Cleveland is going to win a Super Bowl, so that's out. I would even say the championship out. So if I was risking any money on Cleveland, 5-1 is not bad. I don't know if they'd be able to beat out Baltimore, but again, if I'm thinking of taking Cleveland, that would be the way that I would go. Bottom line is, like I said, I just have a good feeling that this is going to be a much better year. I might actually pick them as a playoff team. And look, it might come down to Cleveland or Pittsburgh. Really, if you come to think of it, because three teams winning a division is three teams in the division, all being playoff teams, not very easy to do. But not only is it nice that, I got a good feeling about Stefanski. Really, all you have to do is compare him to what they had before. And that's a big bonus. But I also like what they did in the draft. I like what they did in free agency. So there's a lot of, I just look at this roster. I look at the depth chart at ourlads.com and I'm like, come on. If Baker Mayfield, if Stefanski can get Baker Mayfield to play like he was as a rookie and even better, which I'm expecting to happen, this is a very dangerous football team. There are boatloads of talent on this team.
Yeah, there's not a lot of holes in this football team, Greg, especially when you even look at the two deep. It's a football team that if any injury were to occur, people are going to step up and probably likely play well. You've also got, I think, one of the biggest additions to this football team, aside from the talent that they have, all the personnel that they brought in with the offseason signings and the solid draft that they had, is Bill Callahan on the offensive line.
Point.
If you read inside the Playbook Preview Guide magazine this year, Mike Maines does our NFL football preview, and he brings out an excellent point about Bill Callahan and what he's going to likely mean to this football team. You've also got Jedrick Wills, the big mauling run-blocking tackle from Alabama, who's going to be part of that offensive line. And you got Jack Conklin, who was acquired from Tennessee in a trade. So suddenly this offensive line not only looks vastly improved, but they're going to be vastly improved from a mentoring, tutoring standpoint as well. If this all adds to protecting or helping protect Baker Mayfield, he can indeed be the Baker Mayfield that we saw at Oklahoma and we saw in his rookie year. If this all happens, and there's a lot of ifs in our observations here, but if it all happens, Cleveland could maybe end up winning and surprising this division.
You got now Kareem Hunt the full season with Chubb. You mentioned the offensive line.
Yes.
Beckham, who was not 100% all season health-wise, if he can stay healthy, wow, along with Landry. The depth at receiver, a little bit questionable, but as long as Landry and Beckham are out there, dangerous. Hooper, they signed from Atlanta, was big. they drafted Bryant. What did he win? He won that tight end award, I believe, last year from FAU, right? The kid from FAU. So that's a kid to keep an eye on.
Oh,
Harrison Bryant.
Harrison Bryant, yes, right.
And Njoku is going to get traded. I mean, it looks like that's going to happen, but I think they're fine there. Defensively, Myles Garrett comes back, and you would think Olivier Vernon might have a much a better year. It was kind of disappointing last year. They made some good moves up front with draft picks and free agency as well. Uh, Really, you take it to the linebackers. If everything goes well, you got two kids from 2019's draft. You have the rookie Phillips from this year's draft, and then you look at the secondary. You got Ward, Greedy Williams. You got Grant Delpit that you got in the second round, which was a huge steal. And then Carl Joseph you acquired.
Yeah.
That's a heck of a secondary. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, this is just too talented of a team that is long, and that's why it's great that you brought up Callahan, because if Stefanski can look like he at least has some idea of what he's doing as a head coach, and more importantly, teach up Mayfield, he can rely on veteran assistants like Callahan to help him out. And that'll be the difference that gets his team not only the playoffs, but maybe as a little bit of a sleeper to win the division.
I think they are just that. And in fact, you can rest assured that Kevin Stefanski's approach is going to be much like it was when he was the offensive coordinator at Minnesota. He will utilize a two tight end offense for most of the football season here, which really gives more added tools to Baker Mayfield in that sense. And if he ends up being successful connecting with those tight ends, Katie bar the door with whatever it could be with Beckham and Landry can do if they start keying in on them, because Beckham has made the point that he is balls to the wall going to have a good season this football season here. He's healthy and he wants to make a statement. So God forbid if he makes the statement here this year, this could end up being this year that the Cleveland Browns fans have always been wishing for.
All right, and then the Bengals round out the division, 25-1 to win it. We know that's not going to happen. We know the rest isn't going to happen either. 60 for the championship, 150 for the Super Bowl, but it's not about that. It's about a rebuilding process. And Zach Taylor, last year, you give him a mulligan. So now it's about getting Burrow out there, and by the end of the season, knowing that you have your savior. And the way that young quarterbacks today have quickly been able to adapt to the NFL game, like a lot easier than ever before. I would expect by the end of the season, Burrow he'll probably pull out like winning 2 out of the last 3 games. Maybe they'll upset a team or two as he starts getting more and more comfortable with the offense and playing the NFL. They get Jonah Williams back. That's huge. It's like an additional first-round draft pick. So that's going to be a big deal. But I will say this, the one thing, and they couldn't fill out all the holes this offseason. They did a really good job of filling several of them. But the one hole that is still glaring for the Bengals is that offensive line.
Yeah, that's going to have to come in together real quick, because they need to keep Joe Burrow standing upright. And if he stands upright, they could have a chance. I'll tell you what I like about this football team here this year, basically, Greg, is this. There's a formula that I use in the National Football League for gauging teams from one season to the next. And if you take a look at what Cincinnati did last football season here, and you look at what their straight up and ATS record was last year, and it was bad. Okay, they were 2-14 straight up and 6-9-1 to the spread, despite the fact that their offense and their defense improved on both sides of the football. Those are almost always silver-lined football teams who played much, much better than their record indicated, and they almost always come back with a better performance the following year. Now, it's not going to take much to be a better performance out of Cincinnati than 2 wins last year, but I could see this football team winning 6 football games this year because of the Joe Burrow excitement there, and the fact that, as I mentioned here, they played a lot better statistically than they did the year before. So, this is not going to be a doormat, your typical doormat that Cincinnati Bengals have been in the past, or other divisions almost always have a designated doormat. I don't think Cincinnati will be quite that this year. I know they'll be battling tooth and nail not to be finishing in the bottom of this division here, but I think they're going to end up being a surprise.
Yeah, I definitely want
to
play them early because, as I said, I think this is going to be a dangerous team later in the season when Burrow gets acclimated. And look, T. Higgins, to get him in the second round at receiver. to go along with A.J. Green, Tyler Boyd. I like Drew Sample. I was shocked that he was a second-round pick last year, but I like him. So if he could take that next step, Mixon is becoming the bell cow. But again, the offensive line is going to really be what will probably eventually hold them back. They have to fix that next year. Defensively, they made the splash move by signing DJ Reader. He's going to play alongside Geno Atkins, which is going to be really good. They made a few moves in the secondary. And one of the draft picks that I really like in all of the NFL outside the first 2 rounds is Logan Wilson, the linebacker from Wyoming. I think he is going to be a beast in the NFL. I think he's going to be one of those players that is going to be a star before too long.
Well, in our preview on our Preview Guide magazine, we listed the draft picks, and we also highlighted what will be a steal of the draft. That was indeed Logan Wilson, who at the combine completely shined at the combine. And it's no surprise that he led the FBS the last 3 years in tackles and interceptions, and was almost on the same level as Patrick Queen. And here he comes. He was just bypassed. He was because he played at Wyoming.
And he's steal.
He's going to end up being one of these players. You're going to say, wow, what a steal that was getting Logan Wilson from Wyoming. But I think he's going to be an impact player pretty much right from the get-go for this team. And another thing I'm going to throw out at you from this year, too. Another gauge is this football team improved toward the end of the season last year. And when I say that, if you go inside their stats and look at what they did on the field statistically, they outgained 4 of their final 5 opponents on the playing field. They didn't throw in a white towel. They continued to keep coming and playing harder and harder and harder. So, that tells you that Zach Taylor knows what he's got. He's got a hungry football team that's anxious to get back on the field this season here. And if there weren't other teams in this division that I'm so keen on, like the Cleveland Browns, perhaps maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers, I could see maybe if Pittsburgh doesn't all come together, Big Ben goes down, you could see maybe Pittsburgh and Cincinnati trading places here and Cincinnati moving themselves out of the cellar. But I do like the makeup of this football team.
All right, now, in closing, I would say if I was going to make a pick or two just on futures, I would probably go with Cleveland at 5-1. I'd risk Cleveland at 5-1 to win the division, and I would take Pittsburgh at 22-1 to win the Super Bowl. Those would be my 2 potential future moves, which of course we will go over with our final picks because I think where we have it set up, we've got about a good week to 10 days between our final division preview and then when the regular season begins on that first Thursday between Kansas City and Houston. And during that week, we'll make our 2020 final predictions, futures, and all that other stuff. So those would be my 2 picks right now.
I would not disagree with those 2 picks at all, because I certainly would be fading Baltimore. And when you fade Baltimore, you're going to elevate somebody. And the 2 logical teams to be the contenders to elevate would indeed then be Cleveland and Pittsburgh. And I'll also point this out, that if you look at the Browns' schedule, it's very fortuitous from the standpoint that their first 8 games, the first half of the season, they'll take on only 1 team that was in the playoffs last football season. So don't be surprised if Cleveland gets off to this good start and suddenly the pressure's all on Baltimore inside this AFC North division.
The one negative Cleveland is going to have between Pittsburgh and Baltimore will be the lost offseason for practicing. You have a new coach. He's never been a head coach before. He's implementing a new system. Maybe Cleveland takes a little bit longer than the other 2 teams to get going. That might be the only thing I'd be a little bit worried about. But based on the schedule, that could help out, kind of balance things out.
Yeah, it might soften things up just a little bit for them. And I think the new coach theory is going to be much, much more impacted in college football this year than it is in the National Football League. These coaches in the National Football League have been around the block before. Stefanski, yes, it's his first year, but he's been an offensive coordinator in this league. He knows the personnel. Whereas college football, they're basically assembling all new staffs, and they've got to get these staffs and these players together with these new playbooks here in that sense. Yes, Cleveland's going to have to do the same thing. But I think they did a fantastic job in the offseason here, building this football team the right way.
All right, Mark. So once again, Playbook. Take a look here. The Playbook magazine is available, playbook.com. Barnes and Nobles, Books a Million, and so forth. But here you go. We'll be talking a lot about this. I'll be taking an awful lot of information from this book on a weekly basis when we talk NFL football throughout the season. And anything else that you'd like to talk about that's available for football fans right now on your website.
Well, what we've done here, Greg, is we've rolled out an old online tool. We called it the Playbook Advantage, and now with the games being limited as they are, we have a Playbook Advantage that's available. It's no charge to anybody who visits the site. If you're a member at the site, you can download the Advantage, and we do a nice quick spin take of all sports that are being played, and you'll learn a lot of great things inside of the Advantage. One tidbit I'll throw at you real quick here. Is, I know this is a football show, but I'm going to talk the NBA here real quick, is that of all the teams that did not make it to the bubble in Orlando for the playoffs, those 8 teams that had those losing records, the Milwaukee Bucks had the best record in the NBA this year. But you have to also take that with a grain of salt because they were 22-0 against those 8 teams that did not make it to Orlando. So now, when they play against teams that are a little bit of caliber, more up to their level here, we'll see exactly what happens comes NBA playoff time. That's in the Playbook Advantage, by the way.
All right, and also the 2020 Our Lads Draft Review Guide is also available at ourlads.com. You can also, of course, get the draft guide in case, for some reason, you forgot to get it, because it's still very relevant, especially right now. Training camp is beginning, and this is when you're going to start hearing about all these kids. No preseason, limited practices, so it's going to make it real tough for rookies, but still, you want to prepare yourself before the season begins, even though rookies may not make the kind of impact this year like normal years in the NFL, but still, they will make an impact. Mark, I appreciate it as always. Next week, we'll talk NFC South football, and we'll find out whether or not the New Orleans Saints can make it back once again. Can Drew Brees keep doing it? We'll talk about that next week.
I'll look forward to that, Greg. That's a great division. We'll tear that down next week here on the show. Enjoyed being on board. I'll catch you next week.